All right, looks like we are at 12:30. So I'm going to just kick us off for today's session with a brief introduction to this programme and what it is, just in case there's any of you who are new to the FSI here. So a very warm welcome to everybody. Just to give you some information on what this programme involves and what is available. This is a very specific programme that we are running just for international development organised small charities, small organisations, and it is funded by UK Aid. And it's taking place over 2 years, and we're hoping that it has a content or an agenda packed full of really, really useful things for you, because we've built the programme in consultation with as many small charities that we can, and we've also developed an advisory board from international development organisations. So we're really keen to have content that you're going to find interesting and relevant and useful for your day-to-day activities. And just some of the things that you can get involved in and kind of how the program is split up, you can see on the slide. So we've got lots of training and webinars, just like this one. The next things that we have coming up are a specific session on construction projects overseas, where we have a range of different people attending, including a funder who tends to fund construction projects. So really great insight into that area and some of the key things that you should look out for. We have something coming up on communications and how to engage with the public, and really specifically thinking about some of those key issues that you as international development organisations face, and some of the questions that you might get that other UK-based UK-based organisations might not, and how to answer those. And later on in the year, towards the end of the year, we've got an impacts and monitoring and evaluation when working overseas and with partners. And we also have a range of different events, from kind of meet the funders to working with women and girls. But it's not just training and events based. We also have a really great program of advice and peer support. Excuse the word mentoring there. It's not mentoring. It's been adapted as a peer support match, so that you can engage with others in similar situations, other people facing very similar issues and barriers, maybe sometimes, to the work that you're doing, who understands exactly what it is that you're going through. And so we have peer support matches that take place to help you build your network. And we also have a separate program of one-to-one expert and peer advice on any key topics. So if you have anything around HR or finance or fundraising and anything in between that you need support with, we can match you with someone for an hour's free advice with an expert in that particular field. So it's free consultancy, really, for an hour. And we also have bursaries. So if you do know the FSI already, we have a lot of training courses that take place throughout the year. And we have bursaries so that you can access those for free, and that aren't any barriers to you engaging in our different programs. And so if you just go onto our website, and we'll pop the updated link into the chat function for you in a moment, so you can go and have a little look at that after the event's taken place. And I also just want to address what could potentially be an elephant in the room, and that is the fact that this program is funded by UK Aid, when there have fairly recently been aid cuts. So just as a reminder that at the FSI, we exist to create a world filled with independent, effective and accountable charities with the belief, passion and capacity to achieve your visions. And we work to build and share knowledge, to elevate the voice of small charities with policymakers and the public, to help build leadership in small charities, and to support small charities to raise vital funds to meet the needs of your service users. And so, of course, we were absolutely devastated to hear of the cuts to UK aid that were announced by the FCDO, and the loss of the Small Charities Challenge Fund in particular, we feel is a really huge loss to the small international development charity sector. So our Small International Development Charities Programme is funded by FCDO through what remains of the SCCF, and being among the few projects unaffected by these tragic cuts, we are now more motivated than ever to stand up for small charities working in international development. We exist to support small charities, and we will work to ensure that we support you in the best way that we can in the wake of those harmful cuts. And we do have an email address for my colleague Vic, which I'm sure many of you know, because she's the powerhouse behind the Small International Development Charities Facebook group. And if you're having any issues, or if there's anything that you want to discuss around those cuts, feel free to get in touch with Vic. And again, we'll pop her email address into the chat function for you in just a moment. So just really quick pieces, webinar format for today. So we're going to hand over to the fantastic iRise team in a moment, and we're so excited that they've been able to come on board and share their expertise as real knowledge base on this particular topic. But just some of the key practicalities, I suppose. You will have received a pre-training questionnaire, and you will receive one afterwards. Please, 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 can we ask that you fill it in? It's linked to getting your deposit back, so it benefits you to fill it in, and it won't take more than a few moments of your time. We're going to be using the chat function throughout today's session rather than the Q&A function. So if you've got any questions, comments, please feel free to pop it in there, or I'm sure Emily will also take you through if she's happy for you to kind of shout out and unmute yourselves at certain points. We're going to be using the minutes from today's session to just check attendance and make sure that we're giving the deposits back to everybody who's here. And any slides following this will be available on your learner portal that we will pop on there after this if iRise are happy for us to share those. And there aren't any worksheets from today, so no need to worry about those. And this is just where you will be able to find your worksheets following the event. Sorry, not worksheets, the resources following the event, probably 24 hours or so after the webinar has taken place. And just a reminder that if someone's booked this session for you, then the slides and resources will be on their learner portal, so they can access those for you. And just last bits on housekeeping, you might see that there's a notification somewhere that we're live streaming this event, and that's not true. We've just got Rev, which helps us to bring up automated captioning, so it only live streams itself to itself so that we can get live captions for anybody that needs them. But this session is being recorded so that we can share it with any others who weren't able to join us today. I think I've mentioned registration already and the evaluation forms. So a separate note is please feel free to network with each other, share your email addresses in the chat function, which you can then share at the end of this so that you can stay in contact going forward. And you will get those deposit refunds as long as that you attend today's session and that you fill in your post-training survey. Which leads me on to just welcomes and hello. So just to make sure we've got enough time for the iRise team to run through their content, it would be really great if you can save your introductions just for the chat function, so letting us know about your name, your charity and where you work, and that's a great way to start that networking. But otherwise, I'm going to hand over to Emily. Again, thank you so much for giving up your time and joining us for today's session. Really looking forward to hearing about it and the knowledge that you have to share.
Great, thank you so much. I'm now going to attempt to share my screen. So let's see if that works. So let me know if you can see slides. Yay, thumbs up, perfect. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about going beyond pads. So I think we've all heard a lot more about periods over the last few years. I think there's a lot of great work going on out there, but we want to share today a bit around how we can tackle this issue holistically, how we can make sure that we're really kind of having a meaningful impact on girls and women and everyone affected by this issue long term. So we've called it a comprehensive guide to menstrual health programming, but I'm sure it's not entirely comprehensive. And we've got a little photo here, one from each of the contexts where we work. So we currently deliver programs in the UK and East Africa. On the left, you can see Sharita, who runs the Girls Menarche Initiative in Uganda. And on the right, you can see our Youth-led Empower Period Forum in the UK. So I think we're doing introductions in the chat, but we would really like to know before we dive into all the content, if you've done menstrual health programming before, would you be willing to share like your biggest challenge? What's been the thing that you found most difficult or that you'd most like to kind of tackle moving forward? So if anyone is willing to share that, please could you raise your hand using the chat function and I'll hand over to you. Just to get a bit of insight into what people have found challenging before. Actually, I don't know if I can see everybody. Oh, Caroline Walker. Caroline, do you want to tell us about your challenge?
Hi, we work in Ethiopia and have done some training and provided reusable kits for girls in school. Our biggest challenge has been relying on kits provided rather than being able to make kits within country. So we've looked at a few models to try and get a sustainable business set up to get the right kinds of materials to maintain the quality of the packs. And that's been our main challenge, trying to get it production out there rather than over here and bringing them out.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else want to share a key challenge? If you pop your hand up, I can see you. Anyone else? Be brave. Nobody else wants to volunteer. I don't know, Jen, if you want to. Oh, somebody's Kate. Sorry, Kate, do you want to share with us?
We are small projects. We've financed ladies and trained ladies, provided the resources to make the pads. This is in Malawi. I think the issue that we have is getting the feedback as to, we would like to know how this has affected attendance at school and performance at school. And it's actually getting that sort of data at the end of the process, which has been a problem. But actually, I think the training of the ladies and provision of materials, etc., has been very successful.
Great, thank you. And I can see in the chat, Janet said that the challenge is that no one has the money to buy them, which I think is true, is a common challenge that we hear when it comes to a pad product-based solutions. Fantastic. So I'm going to move on now, but we're going to hopefully have a bit of time at the end for further discussion, and we'd love to hear more about your experiences and specifically kind of address your kind of thoughts and challenges. Right, okay. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about how and why periods create disadvantage, because I think this is really important for targeting successful interventions. We're going to talk about the principles of effective menstrual health programming, and then we're going to talk a little bit about our model and our model in practice, and then finally how to get involved in our work, because in both contexts where we work, we have kind of communities and networks to support people doing this kind of work. So we'll talk a bit about what we've got in the UK and a bit about our network in East Africa for those who are working in those areas and kind of might want to access further support or get more involved in those activities. So I'm going to hand over for the next bit to Jen, who is our wonderful evidence and learning officer at iRise, to talk to those first 2 points. So Jen, over to you.
Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm Jen. I'm currently working as iRise's learning and evidence officer. I'm really excited to hear from you all today. Hopefully we cover quite a lot of ground, so I think we'll just dive straight in. So iRise was founded in response to the concerns of schoolgirls in Kenya about the impacts their periods were having on their ability to study and stay in school. At the time, there was very little recognition of the issue of periods or action to address the barriers that it created. Further investigation revealed similar challenges in the UK as well as globally. So iRise set out to respond directly to the voice of marginalised girls by addressing this overlooked challenge. As iRise's work has evolved, the complexities of the issue we seek to address has become increasingly apparent. Intersections with other forms of inequality and harmful social norms and societal structures fail to take account of the needs of the female body. The COVID-19 pandemic has further highlighted these effects. Young advocates across the context where we work recognise that what they need and want was more power over their lives and bodies, and that period poverty and shame are a manifestation of a deeper power imbalance that plague their lives, exacerbated by the crisis. So as you can see, this is iRise's period equality framework, which sets out to capture the experiences of advocates. Produced in consultation with young women, girls, and people with periods across contexts, the period equality flower highlights the different domains where a female body interacts with societal structures and norms to create disadvantage, as well as defining where policy and intervention is required to eradicate this disadvantage. This disadvantage is preventable and is created by how we choose to structure our world. By framing the issue in this way, we aim to capture some of the urgency, frustration, and anger those affected experience when their society limits their potential because they have a female body. So the building blocks of this vision, as you can see on the right, are the three strands of provision, protection, and power. Provision is providing products or services that are less available or accessible if you are female, or gender-specific services or products that are unavailable because they have been overlooked. Protection is protecting people from harm resulting from the negative norms and ideas associated with their gender, or as a result of inadequate provision for their gender-specific needs. And finally, power. So power is increasing the voice, choice, and control of people affected by gender inequality so that their priorities cannot be overlooked. So as you can see on the flower, the 7 petals or components are what this vision means in practice for the lives of those affected by period inequality. Economic empowerment means enabling those affected by period poverty to increase their economic independence so that they can meet their needs in the long term. Leadership and voice means developing structures and spaces that enable diverse leadership and amplify the voice of those affected by period inequality so that their needs and priorities are mainstreamed. Sanitation, hygiene, and menstrual materials under the 3rd petal means ensuring menstrual needs are included in provision of sanitation and hygiene services in all contexts. Access to education means creating spaces and systems where being born female is not a barrier to accessing education. Reproductive health means enabling everyone who is born female to access the information and support they need to manage their menstrual and reproductive health with dignity and comfort, and to seek and access help if they need it. Mental health and well-being means addressing the harmful social norms and attitudes that are linked to menstruation, as well as being born female, so that those affected are more comfortable and confident about their bodies, their identity, and also their capacity to lead. And finally, safety means preventing gender-based violence in all its forms and safeguarding those who experience it, as well as addressing period poverty and shame as a perpetuator of and trigger for gender-based violence. So the next slide is about iRise's 2 COVID-19 needs assessments, which are available on our website. These demonstrate how the components under our period equality framework come together to create systemic period inequality, which have all been exacerbated by the pandemic in both the UK and Uganda, as well as other contexts all around the world. Prior to COVID-19, we already knew that women, girls, and people with periods face a disproportionate burden of the impacts of public health crises that threaten their futures for many years to come. And this crisis, this COVID-19 crisis, is set to be no different unless there is sustained action to protect their futures. In the UK, most telling is how young people do not feel that any government response to the pandemic could have met their specific needs. They feel the scale of the problems facing them and others like them are too far-reaching and complex, embedded in the 7 petals of our period equality flower to be successfully addressed. Multiple drivers of marginalisation, including disability, ethnicity, as well as socioeconomic background, compound to create significant barriers for those affected at all these intersections. In Uganda, the young women and girls who RI supports are painfully aware of what is at stake. They recognise that they are at crossroads in their journeys to achieve their dreams and ambition for the future. It is not just their futures at risk. Urgent action to protect them and address the systemic discrimination they face as part of period inequality will enable them to become key players in supporting their families and communities to recover. Collaboration between stakeholders across sectors to address these complex disadvantages framed in our period equality flower must be prioritised to protect a decade of investment in the lives of girls. So how do we ensure sustainable and equitable progress towards period equality in the face of this complex disadvantage? So we know that menstrual health interventions are complex and highly social by nature. There is still a long road ahead of the sector to comprehensively understand what works in menstrual health programming and address all the dimensions of disadvantage facing young women and girls. Research has not yet convincingly demonstrated that an intervention must be multi-component, for example, to make meaningful progress. So in other words, the relative value of a standalone standalone education intervention compared to an education plus product provision intervention, for example. Our funder assessment framework, which I'm going to explain now, synthesizes the available evidence from academic literature, NGO monitoring and evaluation data, as well as expert consensus on what should be prioritized in menstrual health programming under the 4 I's of intervention, integration, inclusivity, and impact. Successful programs will demonstrate a holistic understanding of menstrual health as a complex issue and consider how the proposed intervention interacts with wider sociocultural and environmental factors. Guidance under intervention outlines what is likely to work best under the dimensions of product provision, education, and stigma and social norm change. Insights under integration demonstrate the opportunities that lie in incorporating menstrual health into larger projects. Recommendations under inclusivity help to ensure that vulnerable and marginalized populations are not left behind. And finally, guidance under impact in terms of effective monitoring and evaluation hopes to support program design which is scalable, effective, and sustainable. So our funder assessment framework is based on a wide range of available evidence, some of which I've pulled out here for your information really quickly. So the UNFPA First East and Southern Africa Regional Symposium on MHM, held in 2018 in South Africa, identified the emerging priorities for MHM in Africa and committed to further action led by an African coalition for menstrual health management. The conference proceedings, which are really well presented and quite easy to read, outline best practice across 7 thematic areas across menstrual health in the context of East and Southern Africa, including menstrual health education, social norms, WASH, and menstrual health for marginalized groups, including those with disabilities. A report by the Kulchik Foundation, A Bloody Problem, which is there in pink, gives a broad overview of the harms caused by inadequate menstrual health and hygiene, and also presents learning on successful menstrual health interventions worldwide. And most comprehensive in the academic literature, which are a bit denser, but really useful, but I will summarize them, are 2 recent systematic reviews in the context of both high-income countries and low and middle-income countries. Both give an overview of the challenges facing those who menstruate around the world, including in relation to the socio-cultural context, which heavily shape menstrual experiences, including stigma and gender norms, resource limitations underlying inadequate physical infrastructure to support menstruation, and also physical menstrual factors such as pain. And an additional resource that is useful is the final systematic review, which is at the bottom on the right there, which looks at how women and girls experience menstrual health interventions in low and middle income countries. So most important for that one is the finding that for all of the interventions that it reviewed, the process of introducing new products, the trial and error involved in that, and the acceptance of new technologies by women and girls is heavily influenced by the socio-cultural environment surrounding them, including parents, teachers, and their peers. So I'll give a brief overview of our funder assessment framework then, based on all of that evidence. So our funder assessment framework ranks criteria included under the 4 I's according to essential, recommended, and desirable criteria. Broadly, there is general expert consensus informed by rigorous evidence on what components must be included in menstrual health programming to ensure effective and equitable outcomes in line with the SDGs and the Sustainable Development Goals. And these are essential criteria under our funder assessment framework, which are coded in red. Beyond that, a review of the evidence base reveals lessons learned about what components have created positive change across diverse contexts. So in other words, what should be included in impactful menstrual health programming, and that's under orange recommended criteria. And then separately, value judgments informed by expert consensus recognize that programs which meet certain criteria tend to be stronger. So interventions which fulfill these green criteria are more likely to enact sustainable change, in addition to helping strengthen sector-wide learning on what works in menstrual health programming. So programs will ideally include these components and have relative merit compared to those that do not. So next slide, thank you, Emily. So most important and therefore listed under essential criteria across the framework is recognising the autonomy of community members only over any decision that affects them, as well as their ability to bring about change. This is in line with a rights-based approach, one which empowers people to know and claim their rights and increases the ability and accountability of those who are responsible for respecting, protecting, as well as fulfilling these rights. Successful menstrual health interventions that have already taken place have demonstrated the wealth of knowledge and resources community members hold, and how involving them in intervention design and delivery can promote sustainable change, as community members have increased ownership over project outcomes, contribute to dismantling the menstrual stigma, as well as strengthen the impact of projects with menstrual product or education components. So for the sake of time, I won't go into intricate detail about the components, but it is useful to highlight the various essential, recommended and desirable criteria that the evidence base suggests are key to equitable and sustainable intervention. So as you can see on the left, this is for menstrual product provision, programs that include a menstrual product provision component. And we know that menstrual products are an important part of meeting the needs of menstruating women and girls. Outstanding questions still remain about how to make these interventions sustainable, as well as ensure uptake and impact. But the evidence demonstrates that ensuring product provision is context specific is most important. So this involves asking the women and girls that will specifically be involved in project activities what their preferences are, and making sure that there is adequate sensitization which supports them in feeling confident in how to use the products correctly, comfortably, and safely. It is important that wider environmental factors have been considered to support this uptake of products in a safe way, as well as ensure sustainable impact. So these two key points, including women, girls, and their communities in choice of product under the red essential dimensions, and facilitating safe, sustainable uptake under orange or recommended dimensions, are key to program design. So as part of a rights-based approach, ideally, programs will provide a range of context-appropriate products or materials to facilitate choice between menstrual management methods, which is highlighted in green at the bottom there. This recognises that individuals have unique experiences of menstruation and as a result benefit from access to different menstrual management methods. So ideally, all products should be promoted equally to ensure informed choice. So on to the next one then. So this is under for education interventions. To ensure education on menstrual health is context specific, interventions which have an educational component must show evidence that women, girls, and their communities have been consulted during intervention design. And this information directly informs culturally and contextually appropriate education provision. These programs should be age appropriate and biologically accurate. Beyond this, we know that misinformation on menstruation can cause those who menstruate a great deal of harm. In imparting biological knowledge about the menstrual cycle and about their bodies, misinformation can be addressed, and those who menstruate empowered with knowledge about their cycle, their fertility, as well as their menstrual blood. Education programs should also support effective menstrual management practices and the identification of abnormalities. This equips girls to feel more informed, confident, and in control of their menstrual care and bodies. So for education then, there are two key prongs to education that are highlighted in the evidence base as key. So the first is biological knowledge, and the second, practical menstrual management knowledge, both highlighted in orange as recommended criteria. So finally, for education programs, we know that not understanding what menstruation is before your first period can cause very high levels of distress as well as shame. So education interventions will therefore ideally aim to educate adolescent girls before they have started menstruating. And finally, under intervention, for interventions with a component that seeks to address stigma and social norms, community consultation is of course of the utmost importance. How menstruation is conceptualized culturally via invisibility, myths, menstrual taboos, stigma, and negative social norms plays an important role in the success of direct interventions. Regardless of intervention design, proposed projects must demonstrate awareness that how menstruation is conceptualized culturally via invisibility, myths, menstrual taboo, stigma, and negative social norms plays an important role in the success of direct interventions. So yeah, we can move on to the next one. Thank you, Emily. So the funder assessment framework also provides guidance under integration. Menstrual health should be a priority and seen as a health issue in its own right, but there are opportunities to scale programs by incorporating menstrual health into larger projects and or infrastructure. So projects which build on existing work in other areas may aim to integrate menstrual health into existing programming, as these projects are valuable opportunities to reach more women and girls. These sectors include, but are not limited to, school-based programming, WASH programming, and section reproductive health programming. And then finally, under inclusivity, priority should be given to interventions which demonstrate plans to ensure that vulnerable and marginalised populations are not left behind in planned intervention activities. So projects should demonstrate an in-depth understanding of their populations and the kinds of disadvantage and challenges they experience, and how intervention design makes sure everyone is able to benefit from project activities. Ideally, all projects will actively incorporate the needs of those with disabilities and how they can be supported to build self-efficacy. Other populations include, but are not limited to, young people, people living with HIV, people who do not identify with the gender they were assigned at birth, sex workers, FGM survivors, homeless people, as well as injecting drug users. I did say finally, but there is one more slide. So finally then is impact. So building an evidence base on what works in menstrual health programming is a sector-wide priority moving forward. And of course, successful monitoring and evaluation can help organisations improve their programmes into the future. So project evaluation will ideally contribute to the growing evidence base, and a clear understanding of the interaction between the process through which change could occur and intervention context is important. So it's useful to highlight here that there was another iRise resource that might be useful. iRise has created an evaluation toolkit, which is accessible to smaller grassroots organizations working on period equality, that provides guidance on useful evaluation metrics in line with current best practice in menstrual health. This toolkit includes selected questions from the Menstrual Practice Needs Scale, which measures women and girls' perception of their menstrual needs being met, knowledge and attitudes towards menstruation, as well as community level social norm change. And then finally, the funder assessment framework does also include 2 sections on girls' leadership and sustainable change as additional dimensions and to think about. So projects that can demonstrate that girls' voices and experiences are at the centre of intervention development, and that enable girls and young women to lead change should be prioritised, because a lack of representation in decision-making spaces is a root cause of why the needs of girls remain unmet, particularly when they are menstruating. Sustainability is a big challenge for small-scale menstrual health interventions in particular, so strong plans for making sure positive change is sustained are key. Sustainability here does not mean without further investment, but instead that there is a clearly defined plan for making sure gains are not lost as soon as a project or funding finish. So that was my whirlwind stop. Whirlwind tour, Emily, so back to you.
Thanks, Jen, that was great. So just to say, that really was a whirlwind tour, but if anyone, we've got that framework is accessible if you want to use it to think about your own programming. And as Jen mentioned, we do have the M&E toolkit and the evaluation toolkit, which is also accessible. So if you'd like to access any of that, feel free to drop us an email. And I think we've also linked to it in the notes on these slides, so they should be accessible there. We also have a menstrual health education toolkit that we, for the East African context, that we developed kind of over a number of years with training for educators, kind of people at the project officer level, teachers, and with resources for young people. And so all those kind of resources are there and are freely available to anyone that wants to use them. I was just going to briefly talk now about our model specifically and kind of what we do in some of our programming, just to try and bring some of it alive. So iRise has a set of fundamental principles that we like embed in everything we do, and a lot of those kind of resonate with some of the framework and some of the stuff that Jen's already presented. But basically, we're committed to community-led change and centering the priorities and leadership of those who are most affected by the issues in our programs. We're committed to leaving no one behind, which means that everybody who's affected by the issue needs to be involved and benefit in some way from our intervention. And then we're also committed to accountability through evidence, trying to really focus on the root cause, working collaboratively and trying to prioritise sustainability. And then our theory of change basically creates change at 3 levels. So whatever programme we're doing, whatever initiative, it's guided by those principles and by this theory of change. So we work directly with people affected on practices and perceptions. So that's all about bringing those most affected together to form a community to help them really understand their needs and how they can kind of overcome the challenges they face. And then we help them to create change more widely under our structures and stereotypes strand. So that means working with the wider community, those who don't necessarily have first-hand experience, but who are part of the system that creates challenges or can address challenges, to make the environment more supportive of people who are experiencing these issues. And then finally, we call it data and dialogue. So we take all the learning from our projects and we help those who've been involved to advocate for wider change. So working with government and other civil society partners to try and institutionalize changes. And I just wanted to talk about a specific program in a bit more detail to try and demonstrate what that means, because it's a bit abstract. I appreciate that. So one of our longest running programs is our period friendly school project in East Africa. And we started developing that sort of 5 or 6 years ago. And we started off with a very simple kind of pads-based intervention, teaching girls to make pads. And we found that actually that wasn't necessarily delivering all the outcomes we wanted. And so then we combined it with education and we did a really big evaluation exercise, and we found it still wasn't quite doing what we wanted. And we finally kind of learned from those pieces of work that the social norms and the behaviour change were really key to achieving the long-term impacts on girls' education, on girls' well-being and confidence. And so we kind of landed on this intervention where basically there's 3 strands. There's education, product provision and school facilities, but it's driven by the community, by the behaviour change element. So what we do when we approach a community is we recruit community champions, and they can be from local government, they can be from school leadership, they can be young people like the local youth counsellor, but basically people who are already in the community, who care about the issue, who believe it's really important. And they form a group right at the start of the project, often even before the project begins, and they then drive the project in that community. And so there's some kind of standard structure to it. So there's a training curriculum that is developed, but they'll be kind of heavily involved in thinking about how that's done, and about thinking particularly about the local context and what particular myths or ideas need to be covered. And then in product provision, they'll play an active role in thinking about what products should be offered in that community. So we'll offer them a whole selection of everything that we have available in the country. And they'll have a meeting with the community, and people will try different products, and then they'll have a say in that final kind of strategy in terms of what's supplied. And then in terms of the school facilities, they often drive that change. So we'll help them put in place policies in the school about what period friendly school facilities look like, but then they'll often be the ones driving those changes. So getting local government to kind of to maybe include some support for that in their budgets, or mobilizing community leaders to make sure that, you know, some of these small low-cost changes are made. And most importantly, they also have their own budget. So we have a small amount of money that we allocate to them, and they use that to tackle a key bottleneck to change in their community. So they'll go through a process of thinking about the issue. You know, we've got these 3 very practical strands in terms of what girls need, but they'll have a think about what's the big barrier. And then they'll use that budget to create, to deliver some kind of behaviour change intervention to help make sure that intervention is successful. So a really good example of that would be in one community, we were getting, the education was happening, the products were happening, the school facilities were improving, but we weren't really seeing the impact we wanted to on girls. And the community champions had a big discussion, and they realized that basically the many people in the community felt that there was a religious barrier to girls going to school during their period. So even though they had better equipment and they had what they needed practically, they were still keeping their daughters at home. So they arranged a big community meeting where they got a load of local religious leaders together, and they got the parents and the school leadership, and there was a big conversation about how it was okay for girls to go to school during their period, and there was no religious barrier to that, and the religious leaders kind of supported that. And then after that, we started to see the improvements in attendance and performance that we look for. So that's kind of an example of it in practice. And it's a shift in, we always say power, not just pads. And it's a shift away from, yes, the pads are really important. Yes, the education is really important. Yes, the facilities are really important. But what makes it transformative and sustainable is putting more power in the hands of people that care about the issue, and ideally in the hands of those who experience it as well. And this is just an example of one of the models we've used to help us do that, which we also have, you'll be surprised to hear, a resource available on. But we adapted this approach called the replace approach, which has been used quite a lot to tackle social norms around FGM. And it basically helps you look at behaviour change and social norm change across the community. And this is just a table, and I know it looks quite wordy, but it's super simple. So on the left, you've got these different domains where it's like, how much do people know about periods? What do they believe? Are they making any efforts to improve it? And so on. And then along the bottom, you've got like the community moving from like not caring about the issue to caring a little bit, to starting to do things, to actually being able to create and sustain change themselves. And this model is what we've used with our community champions to help them think about where they target their intervention. Is it about getting the religious leaders together? Is that where the bottleneck is? Or is it about something different? And so we've used tools like this that to combine with the really practical stuff to help us make sure that we're tackling the social norm element, because as Jen said, all the research shows that that's so critical, and it's shaping the effectiveness of whether a girl feels able to use the product she's been given, whether she feels comfortable, whether she uses it safely. That's all shaped by this broader environment, and these frameworks really help you tackle that. And then just to say that once we started using that, we had amazing results. Like we really struggled for a long time to see the changes we wanted, and when we adopted these approaches, we saw some really, really good stuff. And so we saw basically a reduction in absenteeism of about 50%, improvements in a girl's exam performance, and also reduced dropout. And then when we did like the cost effectiveness modelling, it's really cheap. It's like £7 a girl. And we estimate that we're preventing 1 school dropout for every 90 girls supported. And so it's really kind of, we're getting these really tangible benefits. And we did an independent impact evaluation after all the pandemic disruption, and we actually found that a lot of the changes had been sustained by the community champions. So even though our staff couldn't get to some of the communities, they continued to deliver. So they'd held education sessions off their own back. They held a period party at Christmas for girls that had started their periods but hadn't been in school. And we found that the independent evaluator basically flagged up this model as like critical to that sustainability and resilience. So yeah, we finally kind of got the results we were looking for. So I think that's kind of me for now. So next we're going to hear a little bit from Akushla, who leads on the UK side, about the work they've been doing in the UK, and also if people are based in the UK working in the UK, kind of how you can get involved in that side of things. And then Patricia has joined us from Uganda, and she is going to talk about TPEN, which is their network of grassroots organisations working on this, and their allies, so small UK charities, individual experts who are really passionate about supporting this issue in East Africa. So we're going to hear from both of them just to give you a flavour of kind of, I suppose, a bit more flavour of what some of this stuff looks like in practice, and also a bit more information about exciting stuff that you can get involved in, or your partners can get involved in. So Akusha, I think it's over to you now.
Great, thank you. Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Akusha. I'm the UK Projects Manager here at iRise. So I kind of want to take you through a case study of basically everything that Emily and Jen have spoken about, but in practice here on the ground in the UK. And this is around our project called Empower Period. So as you can kind of see on the screen, there's like a lot of young people involved in Empower Period, which essentially is a youth-led movement that iRise has sort of fostered and nurtured and is facilitating, which is enabling young women and girls and other young people in the UK to lead their communities and also lead the country to period equality and period freedom. So Empower Period, we started obviously around COVID times, and we were planning to do a lot of in-person events with a lot of the young people and doing some face-to-face training, and unfortunately that didn't happen. What did happen instead was that we saw a lot of our young advocates come together to realise the importance of prioritising women and girls' needs during the pandemic and the worsening of period poverty and shame. And so we started by working with some of our most passionate young advocates to develop their own programmes in their local communities and sort of empower their communities from the youth upwards. And that was something that we persevered with throughout COVID, whether it was virtually or some work that was in person if and when we could. But ultimately, the young people, on reflection of working in their local communities, identified that they felt incredibly kind of lost and incredibly left out of all of the COVID recovery plans that local and national government were making. And so they identified that women and girls and people who have periods, their needs were not being met. And they were basically fed up with it and wanted to do something about it. So they came together and sort of took their learning from their local work and from their own smaller advocacy projects, brought themselves together and created the Empower Period Forum. So the Empower Period Forum is essentially a group of fantastic young women in the UK who feel really passionately about ending period poverty and shame in line with the government's vision by 2025. And so what they did was they identified that the problem was that there was a lack of voice and a lack of power with young people being able to say exactly what it is that they wanted to see in terms of ending period poverty and empowering women and girls. And so what the first thing they wanted to do was to make sure that it wasn't just their voices and their views that were being heard within their work. It was kind of a collaborative piece of work along with a lot of young people across the UK. And so the way that that looked was in the form of community consultations. So essentially what we did was we invited as many young people as we could from incredibly different backgrounds and circumstances to come together to talk about how period poverty and shame has been affecting them during the pandemic. And we ended up speaking to just under 100 young people, all from kind of different backgrounds and different diverse menstrual experiences. And we were sort of able to understand exactly what it is that young people were facing directly from them themselves, and also what solutions they wanted to put into place to help themselves and other young people facing period poverty. So once conducting the community consultations, we did a thematic analysis of the data, and we identified that there was a certain cycle of disadvantage that was happening in the UK, and I'm sure it is in other places as well. And this cycle of disadvantage effectively was that young people are not receiving good quality or enough access to menstrual health education. And this then means that if there is an issue with their menstrual health or they're struggling with their menstrual health, they find that there is a barrier of shame to being able to access healthcare services specifically for those menstrual health related needs. And so what happens then is if we do have young people who pluck up the courage to then go to a doctor or go to a GP to talk about their menstrual health and their sort of menstrual health issues, often that is not successful. And it's unfortunately true that sort of women's pain in particular is often dismissed by doctors. And so what happens is that individual often ends up trapped and feels that shame and silencing from being dismissed, from trying to sort out the pain and the experience that they're going through. And it's a consistent cycle of not being unable to understand what's going on in your body, and then not being able to advocate for yourself to be able to receive the treatment and healthcare that you need, essentially. And so when we conducted this community consultation and identified the cycle of disadvantage, the young people in particular wanted to launch a national campaign. They wanted to make sure that this is going to reach local communities as well as national government level. And one of the ways in which they've done that is through the creation of a manifesto. So looking at all of the data we collected from young people across the UK, we developed a 10-point manifesto, which essentially outlines demands and needs from young people, especially girls and women across the UK, that they want organisations and individuals and politicians to pledge towards. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the campaign now, and also some ways in which you as kind of individuals of representing organisations can come and support their work. So as I said, they started off by creating this fantastic manifesto, which you can find on our website. And there's a huge kind of variety of menstrual health related issues that they've addressed on that manifesto. Yes, including access to products. But as we've said sort of throughout this entire session, it's a lot more than products. It's much more about power. It's about leadership. It's about who's sitting at the governance table and making these decisions that are enabling so many young people to experience period poverty and shame. And so if you're interested as an organisation in endorsing the manifesto, then I'll put my email in the chat, and ultimately we'd love you to have a look at the manifesto and look at what the young people are saying. And if you as an organisation agree and want to commit to amplifying the voices of young people, then it would be fantastic if you could send me your organisational logo, and we can add you to the manifesto pledge. So we already have some fantastic organisations who have pledged for the manifesto, including Plan UK and Dates for Girls, and lots of other sort of smaller youth organisations across the UK. So I'll put my email in the chat once I'm done with this. And I also kind of wanted to talk about some of the more practical things that the young people are doing to address this cycle of disadvantage that they identified. And there's two main ways in which they're doing this. Firstly, through creating a menstrual health resource library. So they have, as young people, have collated as many menstrual health education resources as they think is useful for other young people and for other educators of menstrual health. And within this library, it's not only been chosen by young people, but a lot of the resources have been made and created by young people as well. And so we can also put a link to that. Actually, it hasn't launched yet, so we can't put a link to that. But if you want to email me and have access to it, then again, I'll drop my email in the chat. We'd love for you to have a look and to take it to your young people and to educators that you know, and consider using this resource, which has been entirely created by young people for young people, to empower them to advocate and to lead in their own lives as well. Another thing that the young people of the forum are also doing in that campaign is around amplifying the voices of those who have experienced disadvantage when it comes to menstrual health related issues. So across the IRISE social media, there will be the sharing of stories around young women in particular who have experienced issues such as PCOS and endometriosis, and their struggles to really access the correct and helpful treatment that they need. So keep an eye on our social media for that if you would like to sort of share and amplify their voices alongside our young women who are doing that as well. And some other sort of ways in which you can further get involved as organisations is through our education packages as well. So at IRISE, we deliver education packages and sessions to different age groups of people, different genders, depending on what it is that you need as an organisation or the young people need. So this could be relating to advocacy and activism, and how to lead. It could be relating to diverse leadership, and how to sort of get a seat at the table that makes decisions. But we also deliver menstrual health programming in terms of menstrual health education sessions that can be related to, you know, the simple biological processes, but also relate to what's going on socially, what's going on with these social and cultural norms that Jen was talking about previously, which make this an issue in the first place, and how can girls and women empower themselves to lead their way out of that shame, and to empower others to do so as well. So again, please do get in touch if you would like us to lead on some education sessions for either your organisation or the other young people and young women you work with. And the final thing to say is one of the main pledges in the manifesto is around free access to products, which I've seen in the chat is obviously a huge issue for so many of us across the world. And luckily, iRise has been able to collaborate with Modibody, who are a reusable period pants organisation, and they have given us a great kind of like host of different pants for different sizes and different flows and different needs. And we are essentially doing a training session in a couple of weeks' time, which is in person in Sheffield, where we will be teaching organisations how to utilise these products and also to order some as well for free. So if you're interested in sort of getting some free reusable period pants and you're based in the UK, please do get in touch and we can organise to do that. But yeah, I think that's sort of a summary of Empower Period. Let me know if there's any sort of questions at the end. And yeah, thank you. I'll give it back to Emily now.
Thanks, Akusha, that was great. So last but not least, we've got Patricia joining us from Uganda to talk about TPEN, and then we will have time for questions and discussions. So Patricia, I'm going to hand over to you. I hope just say something so we can check your sound's working.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Okay, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patricia Humura, and I work with iRise Institute East Africa. I also support in coordinating the Period Equality Network East Africa that we are hosting with iRise International. Thank you. So, who are we? iRise Institute East Africa is a registered non-government organization that was established in 2016. And our operations are national and also across East Africa. We have our offices in Kampala, and we host the Period Equality Network East Africa with member organizations from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Burundi. To date we have network members who have gone to 80. So in this, across all these countries, the people who have registered to be part of the network and who participate in the network activities are 80. Our vision is a world in which women and girls achieve their potential unlimited by periods. And our mission is more on empowering women and girls in communities to socially and economically pursue their life's goals and well-being through creating menstrual-friendly communities, advocating for policy change, promoting economic freedoms, and advance diverse leadership development for girls and young women, as well as build grassroots networks, organizations for a collective community. So the Period Equality Network is a community of those working on grassroots period equality initiatives in East Africa and beyond. The picture there is part of the Period Equality Network members with iRise Institute East Africa at the National Menstrual Health Management Commemoration this year that was held on May 28th in 2021. Our goal in the Period Equality Network is to build a movement of best practice among grassroots organizations to support positive menstrual health, sexual and reproductive health, economic empowerment, and leadership development for young women and girls initiatives in East Africa and beyond. So the Period Equality Network was launched this year in April, that is April 2021, with 50 member organizations at the national level, as well as the grassroots setting in Uganda. And we launched the Period Equality Network with a few organizations that were from Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. But today, the network has grown. So many organizations are registering, participating, and to date we have 80 organizations that are from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Burundi. Or maybe you can go back to the other slide. Sorry, I missed. So the network members who we work with are working in areas of advancing menstrual health and management, and then sexual and reproductive health and rights, mental health, women's rights, then economic and empowerment, and then improved livelihoods, youth development, and leadership. So our approach, we use a community-based approach model, which provides a platform for the small organizations to grow their visions and enable them to share resources and learning, access training, mentorship, and be part of an active citizens that support community work and engage in advocacy. The picture you can see is the Period Equality Network members. As you can see, most of them are young. So most of them are young executive directors from other grassroots. We had a meeting with the Office of the Prime Minister on how we can integrate sustainable development goals into the menstrual health and hygiene management work that we are doing in Uganda. So how does the what are the areas that the Period Equality Network supports in? We do provide financial support through corrective resource mobilization in a consortium arrangement defined by an area of interest for small organizations. And the next slide will actually explain more, but funding is to support the organizations to deliver and scale up their projects. We also provide tailored capacity building and system strengthening for the small organizations to improve program design and delivery. We support members to engage in collective policy advocacy processes from the grassroots to the national level, including integrating sustainable development goals that monitor indicators in their plans. The picture that was above is one way on how we are working with the Office of the Prime Minister, Uganda, to ensure that all the organizations in the Period Equality Network can be able to integrate their work into the sustainable development goals. And then we also do navigating barriers that arise due to the COVID-19 pandemic and deliver projects in a safe and socially distanced way to support them in developing safeguarding measures and risk plans. We also provide adequate infrastructure to support the logistics of implementing their projects. And we also we also support projects that navigate cultural barriers for effective community engagement by sharing new developments. So what are our achievements so far from April 2021 to date? So we have increased membership. So in April, when we launched the Period Equality Network, we were 50, and then in March, we were 30. Actually, when we were having the planning processes, the organizations that were there and tweeted with us on International Women's Day were only 30, and they had to grow, and in 17 network members were registered in June, but as of today, September, we have 80 network members. Every new day, members keep joining us. And among the 80 network members, 7 members were able to access small grants to catalyze the menstrual health management interventions. And okay, sorry, I'll be able to answer the questions later. Thank you for the question. And then the Period Equality Network members, also we engage them to actively participate in national and also global days that are in line with menstrual health and hygiene management. For example, we were able to mobilize other network members to work with the Menstrual Health Coalition of the Ministry of Education and Sports, and that's where they were able to participate in the commemorations. And then we also have our WhatsApp group where members occasionally share their experiences, their work, and also the opportunities they are doing. In May, a network member was organizing a hike for girls on Mount Moroto, if you've heard of Mount Moroto in northern Uganda. And we did support one network member to hike. And when they hike, they carry pads to be able to give to the girls and to also create education on menstrual health. Then we've also been able to participate in the national MHM. Okay, all right. So
Sorry, Patricia, my mouse got stuck. Is this the right slide or should I do the next one?
No, this is the right slide.
Sorry.
Yes. So still on the achievements, we've been working with a partner in Australia called the Cover Project Australia, and the partner is providing the menstrual flow cups and also menstrual health education to schools in Uganda. So with the Period Equality Network, this partner was able to support 2 organizations to be able to implement the activity. The one organization is implementing in Wakiso district and another is implementing in Kumi district, still in Uganda. And still more to that, we have been able to have the Period Equality Network was also recognized in the global community of organizations that are advancing the MHM agenda, and these organizations are under the Menstrual Health Hub. So if you have the opportunity and time, you can go check out the Menstrual Health Hub and look at the organizations that are working on menstruation. You'll see the Period Equality Network among the global networks. So still from the engagements with the Ministry of Education and Sports and mobilization of these different network members, we were able to engage them in meetings with the Ministry of Education and Sports on the national strategy for menstruation in Uganda, but also on the commemoration of MHM. So 7 executive directors from the Period Equality Network, they were recognized, they were awarded with certificates from the ministry, one for the tremendous work they are doing because they were asked to showcase their work. And it was observed that most of them are grassroots and are implementing the work in different parts of the country. And then we also had 12 network members who were recognized as champions because they are active, they're young people, and they were also given certificates on the National Day on Menstrual Health Hygiene Management Day that was on 28th May 2021. So the picture below was taken, this picture was taken when we were at the Ministry of Education and Sports, planning for the MHM Day, and part of this, most of them you can see they are young people. So most of these grassroots organizations are young people who are from like rural settings, but also who are from the urban settings. So we also have the small grants program, and that is why we talked about on how we do provide some funding. We have the small grants program that is with support from IRISE International through the Waterloo Foundation. So this small grants, this small grants program is to be able to provide the networks in IRISE that are in the Period Equality Network to be able to scale up their projects and also deliver, make them sustainable in the different communities where they belong. So 5 organizations out of 80 in Uganda have benefited from this program. 5 organizations, these are Faraja, Africa, Girl Power Connect, Development Foundation for Rural Areas, and Dodi Community. And among all these organizations, 2 are working in the urban and refugee settings in Uganda. So they've been able to implement some of the activities in the refugee settlements and in 5 districts. So among all these organizations, most of them are implementing activities in schools, although the others are also engaging community members. And it's of recent that they are begin saying that, oh, menstruation indeed is an issue because most of the negative society norms have grown up in the culture, and some people do not actually tell that they are negative. So this is so the first picture you can see. Yes, Girl Power Connect. Girl Power Connect is a youth-led organization led by a young woman who lives and works in Kabarore district, and she's implementing a project called Bahara's Pride that is focused on demystifying menstrual stigma. So you can see the poster about their activities, and you can also see some with another picture is when the iRise Institute East Africa team was able to visit them during the field work in Kabarole district.
Patricia, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think we wanted to have a little bit of time left at the end for discussion and questions. So I wonder if I flick through the last few slides. I think they're mainly, if we just have a little look through and maybe just kind of draw things to a close. Is that okay? Okay. So these are the questions that I'm seeing on the group chat as I go there. How many organizations are there in Tanzania, and is there a list of their locations, please? Yes, we do have approximately 5 organizations from Tanzania. We have a list. We have a matrix where we write all organizations so we can be able to share some with you. And then someone is asking, are all these organizations in Uganda? So the Period Equality Network organizations are in East Africa. So far, we only don't have South Sudan and Rwanda. Then for those who have received small grants, 6 from Uganda and 1 in Kenya. So that we also have the iRise cover conference on menstrual flow cups. And the aim of this conference is to be able to share experiences on the usage of menstrual flow cups in Africa, and by the Cover Project Australia, because they've been supporting us, and other partner organizations. So the Period Equality Network has been given an opportunity to share the best practice of advocacy at the global level at that conference. This conference is taking place on Thursday, 30th. Registration has been closed, but any person in this group we can give you a link so that you can participate and listen in. Some of these posters are having bios of people we are working with. We are working with partners from Uganda, Malawi, Liberia, Ghana, and Australia, and also Kenya and Tanzania and Burundi. We've also seen other participants from India register. The people who have registered for the conference so far, we have so far who have registered 390 something. So if you would like to participate in the conference, please do let us know. We give you a link. Great, thanks so much, Patricia. That was fantastic. And I've just got a final thing just to clarify for people who are interested in the network. If you'd like to be a member, the membership is for East African-led and registered groups or organisations. And so you can contact Patricia if you or your partner would like to go through that process. It's entirely free, and it means you've got access to the tailored support, the small grant opportunities, and all those avenues that Patricia described to get involved in collective advocacy and learning. If you're based outside of East Africa, but you either wish to support the East African-led movement, or you already are partnering closely with East African organisations to work on menstrual health, then become an ally. That means registering with IRIS International. So you can email our info@irise.org.uk email for that. And you'll get similar opportunities to access learning resources and capacity building to help us kind of support our East African counterparts. If you're outside of East Africa, we don't have a tailored programme for you, but we do have some communities you can join to get support from other people working on the issue. We've got the TPEN Facebook community, which is for anyone who's working on this, who wants to connect with others. And we've also got the IRIS Global Mentorship Circle, and there are links to all of this in the notes on the slide. So those are two spaces where you can go if you're outside of East Africa and you're not working with anyone in East Africa, but you're still really keen, then those two spaces are there for you. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we wanted to have a chance for people to ask questions, because I feel like we've done like dumped a massive amount of information on everybody. So if people have got questions they'd like to ask any of the team, if you want to raise your hand, and I'll kind of pass the questions on to the right person. So yeah, feel free to ask. If you use Janet, over to you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that. That was incredibly interesting. So yeah, we're really keen. So we're working with partners in Tanzania, so we're very keen to network with them. It seems like Tanzania isn't quite so active as some of the other countries in East Africa at the moment, but I would be grateful if you could tell me the best person to connect with to, for networking. And also, are there going to be further opportunities for small grants?
So I'll take that one. So I think in terms of who to contact, if you're based in the UK, I think contact IRIS International. If you're working with East African partners, then they can contact Patricia. There's a space on the website on the TPEN page with a form. And if you fill out that form, you'll be redirected to the right person. But I think I think everybody shared their emails. So either fill out the form on the website, or you're welcome to email either Patricia directly or the info@irise.org.uk directly, and we can point you in the right direction. In terms of small grant rounds, yes, we really hope so. That's the plan, and we're working on it at the moment.
Thank you.
Has anyone else got any questions? If you raise your hand, otherwise I don't think I can't see everybody's screen.
Yes, Charities having a question.
Oh, sorry. Go then, Charity. You're muted, I think, so you need to unmute.
I am working with AT Ghana, and we have just started the PAD program to our young girls in the villages to Lara District Municipal. And we have these children who don't really know much about the usage of PAD, and they don't even know much about their periods, how to get exact days for periods. Some have challenges of having more days than normal. And I think joining this program, I would like to know if I can get some tips on how to go about the whole situation. Thank you.
So is that one for you, Jen?
Pardon?
Sorry, I'll jump in. I think so IRIS has a lot of education resources that might be helpful. I think you can access them through our website, but if you drop me an email, I'll put my email address in the chat, then I can send you some resources that I think would help your thinking around the topic, and educational resources as well that IRIS East Africa found useful in Uganda.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? No? I can see Janet's hand still up, but I think that was from before.
Emily,
Sorry.
is there a question in the chat from Sharon?
Yes, thanks, Akushla. So her question is, did you find that having the religious leaders talk to the communities had enough influence that it led to a behaviour change? So in the example I gave, we did find that before we did that, we weren't seeing any change in girls' school attendance or girls' achievement in school. But then after we did with the thing we then reviewed, changed that element of the intervention, and then we started to see those improvements. But I think I suppose that wouldn't work in all contexts. I think the point is using that community-led model to work out what the bottleneck is. So I think when we've used that model in other contexts, the problem has been different. So we used it in another community where we weren't seeing any change. And we found in that instance, the problem was the school facilities were actually being used by the community and the school, and that was making them dirty and unsafe for girls. And so the school then had to liaise with community leaders and with the district inspector of schools to negotiate a solution there. So in that context, it was a similar process, but a totally different problem. So I think it's about that kind of approach of community-led identification of the problem and solution when there's a bottleneck. So, and then there's a question from Sophie. So she's asking, what have you found to be the most effective way of measuring attendance? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, Jen, if you want to have a go, and then I can and I can chip in if I've got anything to add. Well, not have a go, you know loads about it.
So I think that's a really interesting question, and there isn't one size fits all. I think what we've elected to do in our evaluation toolkit is ask girls who are at school directly about how often they miss school, because that gives kind of a bit more of an understanding of how much they are experiencing their menstruation impacting their school attendance, and that's kind of like a shift that we've that at iRise in this evaluation toolkit that we've been looking at is looking at girls' perceptions of things. So that's what the MPNS questions that I spoke about earlier do. They ask, during your last menstrual period, did you have enough menstrual materials to manage your blood? And then they select an answer from always, sometimes, often, always, often, sometimes, or never. And that gives a really nice snapshot into what if they think their needs have been met. Other than that, I know that iRise East Africa has used flower cards, Emily. I don't know about them in depth.
Yeah, so, and that's something that London School have used in their research as well. So they've given girls themselves a diary for recording their school attendance and their menstrual cycle, which is really useful because actually what you're looking at is the relationship between menstruation and absenteeism, not overall absenteeism. And I know those diary cards are considered really good in the research community, but they are quite time intensive and resource intensive, which is why in the evaluation toolkit we've opted for a question that kind of does the same thing. But I think the general thinking is that for absenteeism, using something that looks at girls' perceptions is enough, particularly if you're looking at other things as well. So if you're also looking at exam performance, which is easier to do using school and government data, if you're looking at that as well, if you're looking at dropout as well, then actually you can go with an easier, I suppose, more subjective measure of absenteeism. I think when we've used registered, they've been very inaccurate. So we did actually do a massive piece of work following up school registers, and it was very time intensive. They were very inaccurate. So I think one of those options, I think there's not a one answer, but that's, I think, the way things are moving. I think there's also a whole debate around whether absenteeism is the right measure. And there has been a global green paper on menstrual measures looking specifically at that question, and whether that is the right thing to look at. But that's probably a separate discussion. But I think as a take home would be, I think if you're looking at it, go for something easy and cost effective, combine it with other measures, because we know it's not the be all and end all, and it's often difficult to capture. I think that's probably the takeaway. Kate, I can see you've got your hand up.
I'm interested in, once the hype is over, the bags have been given out, the free pads, the t-shirts, etc. What are the factors that really make sustainability difficult? I mean, I have heard it quoted that actually washing pads is an issue. I don't know how long you would expect pads to last for? Or is it to do with perhaps the change in boys' reaction to the girls? But what affects the sustainability of these projects most?
Great. I think that's a really interesting question. I think I'll say something, and then I think Jen and Patricia, if you've got anything to add, feel free to chip in. I think what we've found is that it's the attitude and behaviour change that drives sustainability. So actually introducing reusable pads, they last for roughly 2 years on average, but it's like what happens after that. And actually, if you've engaged parents, you've engaged teachers, that they can put in place plans for kind of what's next, and there's a sustainable kind of increase in support for girls. So I think for us, it's the long-term attitude change that drives the sustainability. And you talked about men and boys, and I think that's a good example of that. Actually, we do see quite significant changes in their attitudes, and girls report that as a significant benefit for them. So actually, they're no longer shamed at school, they're no longer chased from school if they stay in their skirt. So that the girls see that attitude change particularly as really significant. I don't know, Jen and Patricia, if either of you want to add to that, feel free. It was about sustainability.
I think you've covered it for me, Emily. I don't know if you have anything to add, Patricia.
Well, I think you've really covered it. Like I actually mentioned that most of the issues really are because of the negative society norms. They sort of like, people think they normalize them. And what really matters is creating that change of mindset. And I think Emily has already talked about it.
Great, thanks, Patricia. So I can see Caroline's got her hand up as well. Over to you, Caroline.
Yeah, funnily, I think you just started talking about it there, but one of the things that we found from our research on girls' attitudes around periods in schools is that a lot of the stigma and the shame comes from boys and bullying, and that's something that we want to start doing training with boys as well as the girls to try and tackle that. So I was just wondering about your experience, or anyone's experience, of working with boys and what some of the key messages are, and also what age you would start engaging with both the girls and the boys to start having conversations around this.
So I don't know, Patricia, if you want to comment on that, and then if anyone else has got any experience, feel free to put your hand up as well. So yeah, Patricia, boys, what do you do with them?
I beg your pardon, sorry, I got like an interruption.
Sure. We're talking about boys and how to effectively engage boys, and if you've got any kind of insights or experiences of how you do that in your context.
Okay, so you see, because we work with schools, and most of these schools are mixed schools, so when we are conducting like menstrual health educations, we used to conduct menstrual health management and education sessions, and also community engagements. And in our past experience, it was always girls. But you see, most of the girls were like, these are the boys who sometimes stigmatize us. And also there are some boys who are really interested in pushing for the menstrual health agenda. So we started engaging the boys, and the results are actually important, and it could be a sustainable approach, because when you engage these boys, most of them grow up without this opportunity of knowing what is correct, because we have observed that what is common is these negative cultural norms have been normalized. So these boys are not quite sure whether this is right or wrong. So when they are engaged, they sort of get to know what is the right information, and that enables them to make the right choices. And that is how we engage them in school, in communities. And some of them have been asking if they can be community champions, because they've been supporting girls in school when girls color their skirts, when the skirts or dresses get colored with red. Instead of laughing and jeering at them, they create that friendly environment of talking to them. Oh, you your skirt has been colored with red. I think you need to change your sanitary pad, something like that. But before you know, the whole class would laugh at you. So that would really not create a friendly environment. And it is a recommendation in every district we go to when we are engaging the different chief administrative officer. He's like, how about the boys? What are you doing about it? Because it appears they are interested. So we also implement what the community wants because they own the project and it's a sustainable approach.
Thanks, Patricia. And I'll just add one really small thing, because I think we're out of time, which is that we did a bit of research with girls and boys. I think we've done it in the UK and Uganda, and we find that the girls really don't want the boys in their sessions, and the boys really want to be in the session. So what we tended to do is do them separately and then bring them together. But I always find that quite funny. There's real reluctant. Girls are like, keep the boys away, and the boys are like, let us in, let us in.
Can I just ask quickly if there's anything on what age you would start engaging them?
I mean, I think our organisational perspective on that is that it needs to be as young as possible. I think the barrier is what is socially acceptable, that, and particularly in the UK, like our feeling is that this should be integrated throughout children's lives and education. Like it should be age appropriate, but it should all start very young and build up. There's social resistance to that, and I think there's only so far that government and schools are willing to go without experiencing a backlash. So I think our answer would be as young as you can get away with, to be honest. Great. And then Jen just added something to say that her experience of doing a pilot education intervention in Kenya was that mixed sessions were very embarrassing for girls, and they followed up with a mixed gender session. Great. Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed preparing for it. We love talking about this stuff. Please do get in touch with us if we can help with anything. We're super friendly, and we're here to help others like do this stuff and kind of, promote shared learning and collaboration. So please do feel free to reach out if you think we can help with anything at any point. Thank you.
Thank you to the whole iRise team for such an insightful and useful presentation. That was great to have you on board and giving that input to other organisations interested in the topic. So thank you. As I mentioned, Emily, as long as you're happy for us to share the slides, we'll get those onto our learner portal for you all. I'm just going to touch base on something I mentioned at the beginning about this programme as a whole, and that is our peer support match. So if you haven't joined it yet, it is simply a case of us matching you with somebody else who works in an international development programme. So you've got a bit of a network, a bit of a supporter base, where you can touch base a couple of times over a coffee and just chat about things that are impacting on your organisation, difficulties that you're having, your successes. So if anybody would be interested in joining and you haven't, then we're just going to launch a poll to ask you if you would like to participate. And if you would, then we'll just go on in the background and we'll match you to somebody else who's been on this session or on the programme as a whole. And then you can take it from there. But otherwise, I would like to say thank you to everybody for participating and coming along today. And thank you again to the iRise team for such a fantastic presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.